My name is Elena Carter, and 6 months ago, I thought I had it all. At 29, I was a senior marketing executive at one of Chicago's top firms, living in a sleek downtown apartment with my fiancé, Nathan Cole. We'd been together for 5 years, and when he proposed on the shores of Lake Michigan under fairy lights and a setting sun, I believed my future was set. I never imagined that the person who would shatter my perfect life wasn't a stranger or a rival at work, but my own sister. Looking back now, I realize life has a dark sense of humor. Because if Sabrina Hayes hadn't stolen him from me, I never would have found the man who showed me what real love looks like. My name is Elena Carter, and I still remember the exact moment my world collapsed. I'd just flown back from New York a day earlier than planned. The client presentation had wrapped up ahead of schedule, and as I rolled my suitcase out of LaGuardia, the first thought that came to me was Nathan, my fiancé. The man who had proposed to me under the Christmas lights at Millennium Park with shaking hands and teary eyes promising forever. I thought about how surprised he'd be to see me standing at his door with his favorite cinnamon latte, how his eyes would light up with that boyish smile I used to think only I could pull from him. I still had my key, of course. We were 6 months from saying I do. The morning sun was already high as I climbed the stairs to his apartment, humming under my breath. I imagined him in his kitchen, shirtless making eggs while checking the stock market on his phone. The quiet confidence, the casual power in his posture, the way he'd pull me in for a lazy kiss. My heart fluttered at the thought. Everything felt warm and certain until I opened the door. Silence greeted me. No eggs cooking, no music playing. His phone sat buzzing on the coffee table. I wasn't the snooping type. God, I hated couples who checked each other's messages, but something that day pulled my eyes to it with the force of gravity itself. The screen lit up with a preview. 3 words. Miss you already. I frowned, my pulse flickering uneasily. Another message popped up before my brain even registered the first. Last night was amazing. My stomach dropped. My hand shook as I picked up the phone, its weight suddenly alien in my fingers. And then the name. Sabrina Hayes. My sister. I couldn't breathe. The walls seemed to warp and bend around me. My knees buckled, and before I knew it, I was sitting on his couch, the phone clutched to my chest, feeling my ribs clamp down on my lungs with a pain so sharp it blurred my vision. I don't know how long I sat there, a minute, an hour, just staring at those words, my mind screaming, no, 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 over and over like a prayer to a deaf God. The front door clicked open. Footsteps. Nathan's voice hummed lightly as he entered carrying a tray with coffee and bagels, his tie loose around his neck. You're home early? He said, his tone playful, until he saw my face. His words died mid-sentence. His eyes darted from my face to his phone in my lap, and his whole body seemed to collapse inward. The color drained from his cheeks. Shock, guilt, fear. A cocktail of betrayal so potent I could taste its bitterness on my tongue. Apparently not early enough, I whispered. My voice sounded wrong, detached, like I was floating above the scene watching a woman who looked like me shatter. He stammered, reaching out with trembling fingers. Elena, listen, it just happened. I didn't want to hurt you. It's not what you think, it's been 3 months, and 3 months. I flinched as if he'd slapped me. Every syllable sliced through my skin, cutting me open from the inside. His words fell like shards of glass around us, glinting with twisted truths I never asked to hear. Slowly, mechanically, I twisted the engagement ring off my finger. I looked at it, the tiny diamond Nathan had saved for the symbol of a life he swore was ours alone, and set it gently on the table. That small clink of metal on wood echoed louder than his desperate pleas. I don't remember leaving. I don't remember the taxi ride or unlocking my apartment door. I remember only the cold. The cold seeping into my chest, curling around my heart, leaving a hollow ache where certainty used to live. For days I didn't eat. didn't sleep. My phone vibrated endlessly with texts from my mother, my father, Sabrina herself, messages ranging from "please call me back" to "I'm so sorry you had to find out this way." Had to find out this way. As if betrayal was fine, only the exposure was unfortunate. My mother whispered over the phone, "Honey, the heart wants what it wants," as if that absolved them. My father roared, "No daughter of mine would do this to her sister," as if his rage could stitch the gaping wound back together. But nothing they said mattered, because in that one brutal afternoon I lost everything. My future, my trust, my illusion of sisterhood, my very sense of who I was. I wish I could tell you I was brave, that I screamed curses to the sky, burned his clothes in the bathtub, cut my hair short, and danced barefoot under the moon like some reborn goddess of fury. But the truth was uglier. I lay in bed for days, staring at the popcorn ceiling, listening to my own heartbeat, refusing to stop despite wishing it would. The ring sat in my drawer, glittering with silent mockery every time I reached for a pair of socks. Some mornings I wanted to fling it into Lake Michigan and watch it sink into oblivion. Other days I wanted to pawn it for therapy sessions I couldn't afford. Most days I just shut the drawer quickly, pretending it didn't exist. People talk about heartbreak like it's the worst pain imaginable. But betrayal. Betrayal rewrites your DNA. It poisons your understanding of safety, of family, of love itself. Dr. Bennett told me this every Tuesday at 5 as I sobbed into her tissue box, tears soaking my pencil skirts and silk blouses. She said betrayal by those we love most creates a wound that demands mourning just like a death. Don't rush it, feel it all. And I did. God, I felt it, every burning second. Then came the wedding invitation, cream-colored envelope gold lettering that spelled out their names in elegant curls, Sabrina Hayes and Nathan Cole, inviting me to witness their vows. 5 weeks from that day. My stomach twisted so violently, I almost vomited. Tucked inside was a handwritten note on Sabrina's rose-pink stationery, the loops of her handwriting so familiar it made my teeth ache. Elena, I hope you can be happy for us. It would mean everything to have my sister standing with me on the most important day of my life. Love always, Sabrina. Love always. I called Tessa Morgan my best friend since college, the woman who once punched a frat boy in the face for grabbing me at a party. They invited me, I whispered into the phone. Who invited you to what? Her voice was thick with sleep. Sabrina and Nathan, their wedding. There was silence. Then her voice sharpened into something feral. Stay there. I'm coming over. 30 minutes later, she stood in my apartment kitchen hair in a messy bun, wearing her old Northwestern hoodie, pouring me wine at 9 a.m. She held the invitation between 2 fingers, as if it was radioactive. This is either the dumbest thing I've ever seen, she snapped, or it's a calculated power move to crush you completely. Either way, you're not going, but as days passed, something shifted inside me. Hardened. A quiet, dangerous voice began whispering, "Why give them the satisfaction of thinking you're too broken to face them?" I stared at myself in the mirror one morning, hollow eyes, cracked lips, hair like wilted ivy. And I thought, is this who I am now? A ghost of the woman I used to be? No, I refused. That was the day Operation Glow Up was born. Tessa planned it like a military siege. Dress fittings dawn, personal training spa appointments, therapy sessions. She was relentless. If you're walking into that wedding, she declared, eyes blazing, you're walking in as a goddess no man could ever deserve. Each sunrise, I dragged myself out of bed, feeling my muscles burn back to life. Each training session, I felt a piece of myself return. I looked in the mirror and saw color flooding back into my cheeks, strength carving shadows along my arms. Antonio, the hair magician, painted golden strands into my dark hair and whispered in my ear, "Men may leave, darling." But great hair never does. Still late at night, lying in fresh sheets scented with lavender, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly overhead, I questioned everything. Was I doing this for me? Or was I letting them own my worth all over again? Dr. Bennett said, "There is no shame in wanting to look your best, as long as you remember your value is rooted far deeper than anyone's gaze." I nodded, trying to believe her words. And then came Dominic Shaw. But that is a story for tomorrow. Because before Dominic, before revenge, before redemption, there was just this girl sitting alone on her cold kitchen floor, clutching an invitation she never asked to receive, whispering to herself, "I will rise. Even if it kills me, I will rise." I wish I could tell you healing came easily. After I left Nathan's apartment that day, I didn't feel anger. Not yet. There was only numbness, an empty, echoing quiet in my chest where my heart used to be. It felt as if someone had reached into me and ripped it out, leaving nothing but raw, pulsing space. I went home, locked the door behind me, and curled up on my living room floor cheek, pressed against the cool wood. Hours passed. The sun shifted. Shadows crept across the walls. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just lay there staring at the table leg in front of me, feeling nothing at all. The crying came later. In the weeks that followed, I drifted through life like a ghost wearing my skin. I woke up, brushed my teeth, answered emails, met deadlines, and smiled when people spoke to me, though my eyes didn't move with my lips. Inside, I was a graveyard of dreams. Each morning I woke with my chest-tight tears, gathering before I even opened my eyes. Some nights I fell asleep fully dressed on top of the covers, too exhausted to care. Other nights I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above me, replaying every kiss, every whispered promise, every time Nathan had tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and said, "You're the only one I'll ever love." And then came the self-blame. The silent courtroom in my head never rested. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe if I had come home earlier. Maybe if I had been prettier, softer, less consumed by work. Maybe if I had loved him better, harder, in ways that bent and broke me to fit his hunger. The questions chewed at me like termites in the dark. Dr. Bennett told me, betrayal breeds shame the way wet wood breeds mold. It grows in darkness if you don't air it out. So every Tuesday at 5 p.m., I sat in her office, clutching a mug of lukewarm chamomile tea, staring at the green leaves floating in circles. I told her everything, the rage, the heartbreak, the humiliation of being replaced by my own sister. She listened with that still unwavering patience, therapist perfect, as if her silence alone could hold back my drowning. Sometimes she would close her notebook, lean forward with her kind eyes and say, "Elena, what Nathan and Sabrina did says everything about them and nothing about your worth." I nodded. I tried to let her words sink in, but believing and feeling are oceans apart. I could know the truth and still feel like their betrayal had branded my bones with unworthiness. On the days I thought I might drown in it, Tessa Morgan pulled me out. She showed up unannounced, armed with pistachio ice cream, expensive Cabernet, and that fierce energy that could flatten armies. Eat, drink, breathe. She ordered, setting the groceries on my kitchen counter as if they were weapons of war. She held me as I sobbed into her shoulder snot and tears soaking her college hoodie. She forced me into the shower when my hair became an oily curtain shielding me from the world. On Sundays, she dragged me to the park, making me sit on a bench under the dying warmth of autumn sun, whispering, "Feel it on your face. The world is still turning, Elena. So are you." Someday, she told me as golden leaves drifted down around us, "You're going to rise from this, Elena Carter. And when you do, the world won't know what hit them." I didn't believe her then. But I clung to her words like a drowning woman clings to driftwood because hope, even borrowed hope, felt better than choking on despair. 6 months passed like a fog. Therapy sessions, sleepless nights, small victories. a smile that felt real, a morning when I woke up and didn't cry, a day I looked in the mirror and thought, I'm still here. I'm still standing. Then one Tuesday morning, as winter melted into a hesitant spring, it arrived. A cream-colored envelope with gold-embossed letters, elegant and heavy in my trembling hands. The return address read, Sabrina Hayes and Nathan Cole. My stomach clenched so violently I thought I might vomit. I tore it open with shaking fingers, bile burning the back of my throat. Inside was a thick card embossed with delicate floral patterns. Together with their families, Sabrina Hayes and Nathan Cole request the honor of your presence as they unite in marriage. My vision blurred, the words twisted into meaningless shapes as if my mind refused to process them. But it was the handwritten note scrawled below in Sabrina's flawless looping script that shattered me all over again. Elena, I hope you can be happy for us. It would mean everything to have my sister standing with me on the most important day of my life. Love always, Sabrina. Love always. My chest burned with something darker than rage, darker than grief. A quiet, dangerous fury that whispered in my blood. They think they've won. I sank to the kitchen floor, the invitation clenched in my fist, the embossed flowers pressing into my palm so hard they left faint bruised patterns on my skin. Tears blurred my vision, dripping onto the golden letters smudging her careful script. And somewhere between those bitter tears and the rising fire in my chest, a voice inside me whispered, No, you don't get to write the ending to my story. I do. That evening, while packing away old boxes Nathan had left at her apartment, Elena found a leather-bound journal wedged between dusty folders. Curiosity gnawed at her as she flipped it open, expecting project notes or grocery lists, but each page sliced deeper than the last. Elena is disciplined, structured. She makes me better. He wrote at first words that almost sounded loving, but then his handwriting darkened, twisted with cruel honesty. Sabrina is freedom. Elena is practice. She teaches me patience so I can be the man Sabrina deserves. She is necessary, but she is not the prize. Elena sat frozen on her living room floor, the journal trembling in her hands as silent tears spilled down her cheeks. In that moment, she realized Nathan hadn't just broken her heart, he had reduced her to a stepping stone on his path to Sabrina. And somehow that betrayal cut deeper than love lost ever could. I don't know when the crying stopped and the anger began. Maybe it was the morning I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, hair-matted cheeks, hollow eyes ringed with bruised exhaustion. And I thought, is this who you've become? Elena Carter? A woman crushed by people too small to hold your love? Or maybe it was the night I found Nathan's journal tucked between his design blueprints and budget notes where he'd written page after page about Sabrina, how she made him feel alive, how she understood his darkness, how with her he felt like a man again. Each word burned into my skin like acid, each sentence branding humiliation into the softest parts of me until something inside snapped, and a quiet, steel-edged voice whispered, "No more." That morning, I picked up my phone and called Tessa. "I'm going," I said, my voice flat, almost mechanical. Going where she asked, still groggy with sleep. To the wedding. Silence crackled across the line like static electricity. Then her voice dropped low and dangerous, the way it always did when she prepared for war. "Then we're going to make damn sure you walk in there not as a victim, but as the woman they'll never forget." And so Operation Glow Up was born. Tessa became my general, orchestrating every detail with ruthless precision. Each morning, she sent me a text at 5:00 a.m., sharp. Rise, conquer, repeat. She canceled her weekend brunches and Thursday night dates to strategize my rebirth over candlelit glasses of Pinot Noir in my kitchen. First came the dress. We scoured every boutique in Chicago's Gold Coast, walking for hours under crystal chandeliers and past mannequins draped in diamonds. I tried on gown after gown, ivory silks, midnight velvets, emerald satins, but none spoke to me. Until we stepped into a small atelier near Oak Street, and there it was. A crimson silk gown that pooled around my feet like molten fire, hugging every curve, splitting high along my thigh, plunging low across my back. When I stepped out of the dressing room, Tessa's eyes glittered with savage approval. "Red is power, Elena," she said, circling me slowly. "It doesn't whisper sorrow. It screams, 'I am not in mourning. Look at what you lost.'" Then came the body. While Chicago still slept under its navy dawn, I was awake, sweat dripping from my temples onto the gym mats. Each squat was a vow, each trembling plank a prayer, each curl, each lunge, each breathless burpee was an offering to the woman I was becoming. My arms carved out sleek shadows, my waist cinched in firm resilience, my legs thickened with steel. I no longer felt fragile, I felt forged. Weekly spa sessions followed. Facials to awaken my tired skin, massages to uncoil tension locked deep within my bones, hair treatments to transform limp strands into lustrous waves. Antonio, my stylist, clucked his tongue as he painted subtle golden lights into my dark hair fingers, working with reverent artistry. "Breakups are tragic for follicles, darling," he said, flicking his wrist with flamboyant disdain. "But men come and go. Great hair is forever." Then came therapy. Dr. Bennett became my confessor, my anchor, my silent witness. She watched me with eyes that saw deeper than my words, holding up a mirror to the wounded creature curled inside my ribcage, whispering, "It is not your job to understand why they broke you. It is your job to heal." But beneath the glow-ups and protein shakes and tear-stained therapy notes lay the final problem, finding someone to stand by my side. Someone who wouldn't shrink from the eyes burning into me as I walked through those grand ballroom doors. I didn't want to hire an escort paid to look interested. I didn't want to drag a friend into this battlefield disguised as a celebration. I needed a presence that would steady me when my knees threatened to buckle. Someone who would radiate calm power at my side, whispering through their mere existence, "She is not alone." At night, I lay awake beneath clean white sheets, imagining their faces as I entered draped in crimson silk, the ballroom lights catching every flicker of gold in my hair, a beautiful man at my side, my head held so high their gazes could never reach me. I didn't want Nathan back. God, no. His touch now felt like filth I scrubbed from my skin in scalding showers. This wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about refusal. Refusing to let them write the ending of my story with pity and silence and sisterly condescension. I would rise from the ashes of their betrayal, clad in silk and strength and crimson fire. Not as the girl they abandoned in their selfish shadows, but as the woman they could never touch again. The woman who burned too brightly for their small, flickering worlds. Because no matter what they believed, I was still Elena Carter. And my story was far from over. A week before the wedding, while sorting through the endless stream of work emails at midnight, I noticed an unmarked envelope slipped under my apartment door. No name, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of thick paper, its edges crisp, the handwriting elegant, yet unfamiliar. My pulse quickened as I read the lone sentence scrawled across it. If you truly knew what Sabrina did, you wouldn't just walk away. You'd destroy her. My fingers trembled. Tucked inside was a Polaroid photo, grainy, dimly lit, showing Sabrina at a bar laughing with a man whose hand rested intimately on her thigh. Not Nathan, someone else. My stomach twisted into a cold, hard knot. For a moment, the world went silent around me, and all I could hear was my own breath, ragged and shallow. Who sent this? Why now? As I stared at her smiling face, frozen in glossy film, a thought burned through my mind like acid. What else don't I know about my sister? I met Dominic Shaw on a night I almost didn't attend. Tessa had spent the entire week badgering me about it. "It's time to rejoin the world, Elena," she insisted, standing in my doorway with a garment bag slung over her shoulder and fire in her eyes. Before I could protest, she unzipped it to reveal a silver silk dress that rippled under my apartment lights like liquid moonlight. "Put this on," she ordered, thrusting it into my arms. "Tonight you're not allowed to drown." I wanted to refuse. The thought of small talk, clinking champagne flutes, and forced laughter exhausted me. But Tessa was relentless, curling my hair into loose waves that framed my face like polished armor and painting my lips a deep crimson I hadn't worn in months. When I finally looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked strong, untouchable. Everything I didn't feel inside. I arrived late, slipping into the Langham's grand ballroom with its gold chandeliers glittering like constellations. The air was thick with perfume and polite laughter. I tried to engage in small talk with colleagues, nodding at jokes I didn't hear, staring at ice cubes swirling in my empty glass, desperate for an excuse to leave. My chest tightened with each minute that passed. I felt like a vase on a pedestal, pretty, empty, breakable. And then it happened. I turned to step away from a conversation about quarterly profits and collided straight into a wall of solid muscle. My half-finished champagne sloshed forward, spilling icy bubbles across the front of an impeccably tailored black suit. "Oh my God," I gasped, grabbing for cocktail napkins from a passing waiter, mortification burning hot across my face. "I'm so sorry." A warm, low laugh rumbled above me. "Don't worry about it," he said, plucking a napkin from my trembling fingers. This suit needed to loosen up anyway. I looked up, breath catching in my throat. Dark amber eyes met mine, framed by thick brows and unruly black hair that curled slightly at his temples. His smile was easy, genuine, almost boyish, despite the sculpted lines of his jaw. He was devastatingly handsome in that dangerous, untouchable way, but at that moment, staring down at me with champagne dripping from his lapel, he didn't feel untouchable. He felt safe. "I'm Dominic," he said, extending his hand, napkin still clutched in it. "Dominic Shaw. Elena." I managed my voice a hoarse whisper. "Elena Carter." "Well, Elena Carter," he said, his eyes dancing with quiet amusement. "Now that we've thoroughly embarrassed each other, would you join me for a fresh glass of champagne? I promise not to spill it." For the first time in months, something inside me loosened. The icy knot around my chest melted just a little. I hesitated only a moment before nodding. "I'd like that." He led me to the bar, his hand resting lightly on the small of my back. It was a simple touch, barely there, but it sent warmth flooding through a body long frozen. At the bar, we stood side by side, and he ordered for us with calm confidence, his deep voice curling around my name like a secret only he was allowed to know. We talked for hours about architecture, literature, the physics of skyscrapers swaying in the wind, the city skyline from his penthouse studio overlooking Lake Michigan. His words were deliberate yet unpretentious, each syllable like a stone placed carefully to build something real. He made me laugh real laughter, the kind that bubbles up unbidden from deep inside. It startled me at first, how easily he pulled it from me, as if my grief was a locked room he'd always had the key to. At one point, I found myself staring at his profile as he recounted a project in Tokyo. The strong line of his nose, the faint white scar along his chin, the way his eyes softened when he spoke about building spaces that felt like home. A thought flickered through my mind, uninvited but persistent. What if love didn't have to hurt? As the gala wound down and guests drifted away in shimmering gowns and crisp tuxedos, he walked me outside. The Chicago night air kissed my flushed cheeks cool and clean. He hailed a taxi with two sharp fingers holding the door open for me, like a gentleman carved from a forgotten era. "Thank you," I said, lingering in the doorway, wanting more but terrified of wanting anything at all. for what he asked softly. For tonight, I whispered, for making me forget. His eyes searched mine with an intensity that made my knees weaken, but his voice stayed soft-edged with something like sadness. Maybe someday you'll let me help you remember too. And with that, he closed the taxi door gently, his silhouette framed in the window as the car pulled away. I watched him shrink into the darkened street, my chest aching with something that wasn't pain for once. It was hope. Fragile, trembling hope that unfurled quietly inside me, like a dawn I hadn't dared to believe in. What I didn't know then was that meeting Dominic Shaw was not an accident. It was the beginning of everything. I didn't plan to tell him about the wedding. For weeks after the gala, Dominic and I drifted into each other's lives like it was the most natural thing in the world. Dinners at hidden Italian restaurants lit by flickering candles that cast molten shadows across his sharp cheekbones. Morning walks along the Riverwalk takeaway, coffees warming our hands in the dawn chill. Late night calls, when his voice alone anchored me back to the world as I lay curled under blankets, fighting off old darkness that clawed at my ribs. He never pressed with questions I wasn't ready to answer. He simply stayed, quiet, present, steady, like an oak in a storm. One evening, we sat in his penthouse living room, floor-to-ceiling windows revealing a skyline shimmering in midnight blue and gold. He sketched silently in a leather-bound book graphite, whispering across paper while I curled my feet under me on the couch, watching the city pulse with a life I felt detached from. My sister is getting married in 2 weeks. I blurted out the words, tasting like blood in my mouth. Dominic paused, pencil hovering midline. His amber eyes lifted to meet mine, calm but alert. "You're close," he asked softly. A bitter laugh scraped out of my chest. We were. Until she stole my fiancé. Silence settled around us, thick but not suffocating. It felt spacious, like he was giving my confession room to breathe without crowding it with pity. Dominic set his pencil down with deliberate care and turned fully toward me, one hand braced on his knee. "That must be unimaginable," he said, his voice low and steady. No pity, only empathy. A quiet understanding born from his own hidden fractures. They invited me to the wedding. I continued, staring down at my hands twisted in my lap, tears blurring the glittering skyline into streaks of gold and blue. She sent me a handwritten note. Said it would mean everything if I stood beside her on her happiest day. He said nothing, waiting with that stillness of his that made me feel like the world stopped spinning just for me to catch my breath. "I'm going," I whispered. The tears slipped down unchecked. Not for them. For me. I need to prove that I'm not broken, that they didn't destroy me. Dominic's gaze never left my face. Then he leaned forward, elbows resting on his powerful thighs, his voice calm but edged with something electric, almost dangerous. "Take me with you." I blinked. "What?" "Take me as your date," he repeated slower this time, as if offering me something precious carved from his own marrow. "Go in there with your head held high, wearing that red dress you told me about, and let them see exactly what they threw away." A sharp ache pulsed in my chest. "Why would you do that for me?" My voice cracked on the question. He smiled, a small, almost sad curve of his lips. "Because I like you, Elena. Because you deserve to walk into that battlefield with someone by your side. And because sometimes burning the past to the ground is easier when someone is lighting the match with you." I shook my head, half laughing, half sobbing. "This isn't just a wedding, Dominic. It's war." His smile widened, dark and beautiful, as shadows from the city lights flickered across his face, illuminating something raw and untamed in his gaze. "Good," he murmured, voice curling around me like velvet in flame. "I've never cared much for peace." I opened my mouth to protest, to tell him he didn't understand what he was walking into, but his fingers reached out, brushing a tear from my cheek with his thumb. The tenderness in that simple touch sliced through my crumbling defenses, leaving nothing but shivering truth. "Elena," he said quietly, leaning so close I could see the flecks of gold in his irises. "Let me be your shield. Let me stand beside you while you become the woman they never believed you could be." Something shifted in me then. The grief didn't vanish, but it no longer felt like chains wrapped around my throat. It burned hotter, transforming into fuel that surged through my veins, igniting every dormant part of me. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to trust this sudden brightness in a world that had shown me only shadows. But as he tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear, his knuckles grazing my jaw in a touch so reverent it made my breath catch, I realized something vital. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about resurrection, about reclaiming pieces of myself I thought were lost forever. And maybe it was about letting someone love the parts I had long believed were unlovable. He leaned back slightly, watching me with eyes dark and unreadable. "Say yes," he murmured, voice deep as thunder. "Let them see you rise." And in that moment, as the city roared quietly below us and his presence wrapped around me like silk and steel, I knew one unbreakable truth. The war they thought they won was just beginning. Because Dominic Shaw wasn't just offering to stand by my side, he was promising to help me burn their entire kingdom to the ground and build my throne upon its ashes. 2 days before the wedding, as I tried on my red silk dress for final alterations, my phone buzzed with an anonymous text. No name, no thread history, just one chilling sentence glowing on the screen. "Ask Dominic why he really wants to be your date." My breath caught in my chest, ice flooding my veins. I read it again and again, fingers trembling. Who sent this, and why now, when he was the only thing keeping me steady? For the first time, doubt crept into my mind like poison. Who exactly was Dominic Shaw, and what did he truly want from me? The morning of the wedding dawned gray and cold, as if the universe itself was mourning the vows about to be spoken. I stood before the mirror in my hotel suite, the crimson silk hugging my body like liquid fire. Tessa moved behind me with silent focus, twisting my dark hair into a sleek, low bun, leaving deliberate tendrils curling down to frame my jaw. Her fingertips felt cool against my fevered skin. "You're ready," she whispered, stepping back to admire her creation. Her eyes glimmered with unshed tears, though her smile remained fierce. "Go remind them who you are." I stared at my reflection, strong shoulders rising from a plunging neckline, bare back glowing with golden undertones, collarbone sharp and unyielding, eyes lined in black coal like a warrior queen, lips painted a deep, blood-red defiance. For the first time in a year, I didn't see a broken woman. I saw a goddess preparing for war. A soft knock echoed at the door. When it opened, Dominic stepped in, and for a heartbeat the spinning world halted. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, crisp and powerful, with a deep red pocket square that matched my gown exactly. The stark palette sharpened the darkness of his hair, made his amber eyes glow molten gold under the pale morning light. He froze when he saw me. His gaze swept over every inch of exposed skin, the hollow of my throat, the curve of my waist, the thigh revealed by my daring slit with an intensity that made my pulse drum against my ribs. "Elena," he breathed, "just my name." But it sounded like a benediction, like a prayer whispered before battle. I swallowed hard, fighting tears I refused to let fall. "Do I look okay?" His lips curved into a slow, devastating smile, full of danger and reverence all at once. "You look like vengeance in human form." He crossed the room with quiet power, cupping my jaw in his broad, warm hand as his other hand lifted mine to his lips. He pressed a kiss to my knuckles, lingering there for a single stolen eternity. I felt that kiss burn down my veins, searing away what was left of my fear. Ready, he asked, his eyes locked onto mine with a fierce, unwavering certainty. My knees trembled under the silk pooling at my feet, but I nodded. Let's go show them what they threw away. When we arrived at the resort ballroom, the world tilted on its axis. Conversations fell silent as we entered, heels clicking against polished marble like the first strike of a war drum. Hundreds of eyes turned toward us, some widening with shock, others narrowing with envy or whispered curiosity. I felt Dominic's presence at my side like an indestructible force field. His hand rested warm and possessive against the small of my back, guiding me forward with calm dominion. He didn't just walk beside me. He commanded the space around us, as if the ground itself belonged to him, and by extension to me. My mother's mouth fell open, her painted lips trembling as tears welled in her eyes. My father watched me with a strange mix of pride and grief, his jaw clenched so tight I saw the muscle jump near his ear. But it was Nathan's face that anchored me to this moment forever. His gaze raked over me from the red dress clinging to my curves, to Dominic's steadying touch, to the easy, dangerous power radiating from the man at my side. Something flickered behind Nathan's eyes then. Regret, loss, longing, panic. I didn't care to decipher it. Let him drown in it. And then Sabrina turned. She froze mid-sentence, her champagne flute halfway to her lips, her perfect pink mouth parting in shock. For a fleeting second, her eyes widened vulnerable, like the little sister who once used to beg me to braid her hair before school. The memory stabbed me clean and sharp. But then her gaze hardened into polished steel, cutting away any remnants of sisterhood. Elena, she purred, gliding forward in her ivory lace gown that fit her like sin and innocence wrapped together. You made it, and you brought someone. This is Dominic Shaw, I said, my voice calm, cold, laced with acid sweetness. My date. Dominic extended his hand, his expression polite, but detached his gaze, scanning her with cool indifference. Congratulations, he said smoothly, his baritone echoing under the crystal chandeliers. Weddings are such meaningful occasions. Sabrina reached out with her manicured fingers, nails painted the same pale pink as her lips, and shook his hand. For a brief, telling moment, her smile faltered. I saw it then, the flicker of insecurity beneath her flawless exterior, the silent calculation in her eyes. The knowledge that for all her stolen victories, she could never manufacture the effortless presence this man exuded simply by standing still. Welcome to our special day, she said, her voice tightening around each syllable. Her gaze flicked to me, raking over my gown with barely concealed envy. I hope you find it enlightening. I tilted my head, smiling with soft cruelty. Oh, I intend to. As Dominic guided me to our seats, whispers rippled through the crowd like wildfire crackling through dry brush. Eyes followed us, hungry for scandal, for weakness, for blood. But all they saw was a woman draped in crimson silk, her head held high, and a man carved from shadows and light, radiating silent promise that anyone who dared approach would be turned to ash. And in that moment, as the violin swelled and Sabrina's diamond veil glittered under the chandeliers, I realized something profound. I wasn't just surviving this day. I was owning it. I was becoming the storm they never saw coming. And as Dominic's hand tightened gently against my waist, his thumb stroking the bare skin of my back with quiet possession, a smile ghosted across my lips. Let them watch. Because I didn't come here to witness their wedding. I came here to bury the woman they thought they broke and rise as someone they could never touch again. I should have known Sabrina wouldn't let the evening end without a final cut. Halfway through dinner, she stood, her ivory gown shimmering under the chandeliers as she clinked her glass delicately. The room fell silent. I just want to thank everyone for being here today. She began, her voice syrup sweet, especially my sister Elena. It means the world that you came to support us. She paused, eyes flicking to Dominic before returning to me, a glint of triumph in her smile. Sometimes love takes a few wrong turns before finding its true destination. Nathan may have chosen Elena first, but he chose me forever. The words sliced through me with surgical precision. My breath caught in my throat. Around us, guests shifted uncomfortably, forks clinking against plates as whispers bloomed like poison flowers. Before I could gather myself, Dominic's chair scraped against the marble floor as he stood tall and composed, lifting his champagne glass with calm authority. The room stilled again, all eyes turning to him. "With your permission," he said, his deep voice rumbling through the silent ballroom, "I'd like to add something." Sabrina blinked clearly, thrown off her rehearsed script. "Of course," she said, though. Her smile faltered. Dominic turned to the crowd, his gaze sweeping the sea of faces with effortless command before settling on Nathan and Sabrina. His expression was polite, almost gentle, but his eyes burned with something fierce and ancient. "I've only known Elena for a short time," he began, his tone quiet yet resonant, "but in that time I've discovered a woman of extraordinary strength and grace. A woman who knows how to rise from ashes others tried to bury her in." He paused, letting the words sink into every listening ear. "And while I agree with Sabrina on one thing, sometimes love does take a few wrong turns, I must respectfully disagree with her conclusion." His gaze flicked briefly to Nathan, who looked down at his plate, and then back to Sabrina, whose smile had frozen into something brittle and desperate. "I am not Elena's consolation prize," Dominic said, his voice dropping into a quiet, lethal register. "I am her upgrade." A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Somewhere at the back, someone let out a low whistle, but Dominic wasn't finished. He straightened his tie, then spoke again, calm and unapologetic. "For those who don't know me, I'm Dominic Shaw, architect and design consultant. I've spent the past decade working internationally, designing the Elwood Tower in London and the Saito Museum in Tokyo. But titles and accolades aside," he turned to me, then his gaze softening with something that stole my breath away. "The greatest honor of my life is being the man loved by Elena Carter." Silence fell thick and absolute. All I could hear was the hammering of my heart as tears burned behind my eyes. Dominic raised his glass higher. To Elena, he finished, voice strong and unwavering. "May she always rise above those who try to keep her small." The room erupted into applause, forks clattering onto plates as guests turned to stare at me, no longer with pity, but with a strange, reverent awe. Nathan sat frozen, face pale, while Sabrina's cheeks burned crimson beneath her flawless makeup. Dominic sat down beside me, his hand finding mine under the table, squeezing gently. "Was that too much?" he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. I turned to him, my chest aching with something too big to name, and whispered back, my voice trembling with tears and laughter. "No, it was perfect." After Sabrina's confession, I didn't go back into the ballroom immediately. I stood alone on the dark terrace, the cool night air licking tears off my cheeks. Below, the gardens glowed under rows of fairy lights, perfect and silent, a stark contrast to the war raging inside my chest. All these years I thought her betrayal was about love, about Nathan, about victory. But hearing her broken voice tremble with jealousy and desperation made me realize it was never about him. It was about me, about how she measured herself against me every single day until her resentment turned toxic, until she would rather marry a man who loved someone else just to feel like she won. A bitter wind blew through the terrace, lifting strands of hair around my face. My chest tightened with something that felt like mourning. Mourning for the sister I once braided hair for before school. Mourning for the childhood where we shared secrets under blankets, where love was simple and unconditional. I pressed my palm to the cold marble railing, breathing through the ache in my ribs. Then I felt it warmth against my back. Dominic's presence, always silent, always steady. He didn't say a word as he wrapped his arms around me from behind his chin, resting lightly on my shoulder. Together we stood in the quiet darkness, listening to the muffled music and laughter drifting from inside. His hands anchored me to reality, his body shielding mine from the chill. In his arms, I didn't feel like a woman shattered by betrayal. I felt like a woman reborn in her own strength. Finally, I turned to him, resting my forehead against his chest. "I'm tired, Dominic," I whispered, my voice raw. "I'm so tired of fighting battles I never chose." He kissed the top of my head softly. "Then stop fighting," he murmured against my hair. "Start living." A tear slipped down my cheek, but this one felt different. Lighter, like rain after a long, suffocating drought. That was the moment I realized revenge was never my victory. My victory was choosing peace over war, healing over vengeance, love over bitterness. And as he held me under the silent stars, I closed my eyes and let my heart rest for the first time in years. The music pulsed low as guests drifted toward the bar, conversations buzzing with Dominic's speech and the seismic power shift it had ignited. Their laughter rippled across crystal flutes, but it sounded far away, muffled behind the roaring in my chest. I slipped away to the terrace for air, the weight of the ballroom pressing against my ribs until I felt I might suffocate. The night outside was cool and silent, moonlight pooling in ghostly puddles across the marble tiles. I closed my eyes, letting the breeze tug at stray strands of hair, washing over me like a quiet absolution. "Elena." His voice came soft and uncertain from behind. I turned slowly to find Nathan standing a few steps away, his tuxedo jacket, unbuttoned bow tie hanging loose around his neck. Under the terrace lights, his face looked pale, almost gaunt, eyes shadowed with exhaustion and something that looked dangerously close to regret. He seemed smaller somehow, as if the glossy confidence I once loved had been peeled away to reveal nothing but raw, trembling bone. "Can we talk?" he asked, shifting from foot to foot. I crossed my arms, bracing against the cold creeping up my bare shoulders. "Talk about what, Nathan?" He swallowed hard, glancing back toward the glowing ballroom before turning his eyes to me. "About everything." I stayed silent, waiting. He raked a hand through his hair in that nervous gesture I knew so well it made my stomach twist painfully. "I thought marrying Sabrina would feel right, easy. But it's not. She's complicated. We fight. A lot. I miss." Don't I cut him off sharper than intended? The word sliced the night between us. "Don't stand here on your wedding night and tell me you miss me." He flinched, eyes dropping to his polished shoes, their glossy shine reflecting the moonlight. "I just wanted you to know it wasn't because you weren't enough." A small, bitter laugh broke from my lips, echoing cold across the marble. "But that's exactly what it felt like, Nathan. That's what betrayal always feels like." Silence fell heavy and suffocating, weighted with everything we would never say. Finally, he nodded, shoulders curling inward with quiet defeat. "I'm sorry, Elena, for everything." There was nothing left to reply, no words that could sew together what had been ripped apart so violently. I turned to go back inside, desperate to find Dominic's steady gaze, but movement in the doorway froze me. "Sabrina." She stood there in her ivory lace gown, her veil pinned back to reveal flawless makeup now beginning to crack. The terrace lights carved silver shadows down her trembling form. Her gaze darted between Nathan and me, something flickering in her eyes, jealousy, insecurity, rage. Something darker. "Nathan," she called, her voice tight, brittle as spun glass. Then her eyes locked on mine. Her expression flickered again, morphing into something raw and unguarded. She stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply against the marble, each step like a gunshot. "I suppose you're happy now." She snapped, her voice trembling with unspent tears. "You got your perfect little speech, everyone looking at you like you're some tragic heroine who rose above it all." I tilted my head, studying her. The sister who once begged me to braid her hair before school, who crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, who whispered secrets into the darkness when we were children. What do you want me to say, Sabrina? Her chin quivered as her gaze darted to Nathan, then back to me. I want you to say that you see me, that you've always seen me. I frowned. What are you talking about? She let out a choked, bitter laugh, wiping tears from her flawless cheeks, smudging black mascara into fractured shadows. You were always the one everyone wanted. The smart one, the driven one. Dad's favorite, Mom's pride. Teachers loved you, boys worshipped you. I was just the pretty little sister in your shadow. Her words sank into me like cold rain seeping deep into bones I thought had hardened against her. She looked shattered, human. For the first time in years, she looked like a girl again, small and afraid and trembling with secrets she never dared to say aloud. I didn't know you felt that way, I whispered. Of course you didn't, she snapped, voice cracking like thin ice. You never saw anyone but yourself. Even Nathan, he talked about you all the time, even when it started. Elena likes her steak rare. Elena hates waking up before sunrise. Elena loves piano music. It was always you. Tears spilled down her cheeks, now streaking her foundation, leaving dark rivulets of mascara in their wake. Her lips trembled as she tried to hold herself together. Then why I asked, my voice trembling with anger, confusion, heartbreak. Why do it if you knew he loved me? She let out a small, broken sob. Because for once I wanted to win. Just once I wanted to take something you wanted. I wanted to feel chosen. Silence swallowed us. The cool night air rustled the hem of her gown. Nathan stood frozen, his face pale, and lined with a dawning horror at what he'd become complicit in. I studied her, my sister, the girl I once protected on playgrounds and comforted through fevers, now standing before me in a wedding dress, shaking with guilt and victory and defeat all at once. Something shifted inside me. Not forgiveness, not absolution, but something softer than hate. Something like pity. Something like freedom. I hope he was worth it, I said quietly. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. She didn't reply. She couldn't. And maybe that was her truest confession. I turned away, stepping back into the glowing ballroom where chandeliers glimmered like constellations and music swelled with hollow celebration. And there he was, Dominic. He stood by the bar, dark and still scanning the room until his eyes found mine. His gaze anchored me with a gravity I hadn't known I craved. As I walked toward him, the last strands of grief and rage slid off my shoulders like a discarded cloak. He straightened as I approached, his amber eyes searching my face. Without a word, he reached for my hand, entwining his fingers with mine. Warmth flooded my chest, melting the final vestiges of ice. And in that moment, as the ballroom doors closed behind me, I realized the truth. This wasn't just the end of my story with Nathan and Sabrina. This was the beginning of mine. And I would write every chapter from here on with ink made of fire, crowned not by their betrayal, but by my own unbreakable rebirth. Weeks passed after the wedding. Spring melted into early summer, bringing with it the sweet scent of magnolia blooms drifting through open windows and the soft hum of bees in the mornings. And with each sunrise, the ache in my chest softened, transforming from a raw, pulsing wound into a quiet scar I could live with. Some mornings I woke to phantom pain, the echo of Nathan's betrayal slicing through my first waking breath. But those moments came less and less like distant storms fading over the horizon. Dominic became my safe place in a world that once felt like nothing but glass shards and betrayal. We spent slow mornings tangled in his sheets, sunlight filtering through linen curtains to dapple our bare skin. His hand splayed across my ribcage as if to keep me tethered to the earth, to him, to life itself. We cooked together burning toast with easy laughter, but perfecting omelets like a small ritual of triumph. At midnight, we walked the quiet streets of Chicago, our hands brushing as we shared secret dreams and hushed voices under flickering street lamps. I learned that he collected old architecture journals and read Neruda before bed. He learned that I hated parsley, loved thunderstorms, and sometimes needed silence to feel safe. One Sunday morning, he took me to his favorite hidden garden cafe, a place tucked away behind ivy-draped iron gates and latticed walls woven with wisteria. The small wrought iron tables were scattered under flowering canopies, casting shadows that danced across our coffee cups. I watched him sip his dark roast, the steam curling around his strong nose and sculpted lips, thinking I could love this man forever and still find new constellations in his soul. "Elena," he said softly, breaking my reverie. He reached into his jacket pocket with a nervous exhale. My breath caught as he pulled out a small velvet box. The world blurred, colors smearing into a sudden, dizzying panic. "Not again. Please, God. I can't survive another promise, broken another ring that turns love into shackles." But when he opened the box, my tears fell for an entirely different reason. Inside wasn't a diamond like Nathan's cold, perfect, impersonal. It was a sapphire deep ocean blue with veins of midnight surrounded by tiny white diamonds set in an intricate vintage halo. Unique, honest, beautiful in a way that didn't scream possession or performance. It whispered truth. It felt like poetry. Dominic inhaled shakily, his thumb brushing the edge of the velvet as he gathered himself. "I know," he began, his deep voice rough with emotion, "that your last engagement left scars deeper than anyone can see. I know you're still healing. I don't want to rush you. I don't need a wedding tomorrow or next year. I just..." His voice cracked and he swallowed hard, blinking back his own tears. "I want the world to know that I choose you. Today. Tomorrow, every day that comes." His amber eyes burned into mine with fierce gentleness as he continued, "So, Elena Carter, will you marry me in your own time, in your own way? Even if it's a 10-year engagement, even if it's never a legal marriage but just a promise between us. Just let me be the man who stands beside you through it all." A broken laugh escaped my lips as tears spilled over hot and clean, pressing my trembling fingers to my mouth as my heart bloomed with something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Real, unadorned peace that settled in my bones like warmth after a bitter winter. "Yes," I whispered, my voice shaking, "but I want it slow, Dominic. I want to build this from the ground up. No lies, no rushing, no perfect performances, just real." Relief broke across his face like dawn cresting over dark waters. His chest heaved with an unsteady exhale as he slid the sapphire ring onto my finger, its cool metal warming instantly against my skin. Then he pulled me into his arms, pressing his face into the curve of my neck, breathing me in as though anchoring himself to this moment. "Whatever you want," he murmured into my hair, his lips brushing my ear with reverence. "Whatever you need." That night we lay in his bed, the city lights casting fractured shadows across his peaceful brow and sculpted jawline. His breathing was slow, and even his chest rising and falling under my cheek. I watched him sleep, memorizing every line and hollow of his beautiful, weary face, the faint scar along his chin, the tiny freckle under his left eye. I realized something profound then. I could have spent the rest of my life chasing revenge, proving I was stronger, untouchable, unbreakable. But that wasn't healing. That was surviving on shards and bitterness, drinking poison and calling it power. Instead, I chose love. Not the curated, performative love Nathan gave polished gestures, hiding barbed contempt, but the quiet, steady, messy love Dominic offered. A love that didn't demand I stay small to keep him comfortable. A love that whispered, "Come as you are," bleeding, laughing, healing, growing. I leaned forward and pressed a trembling kiss to his sleeping forehead, feeling his warmth soak into my lips like a blessing. The city outside hummed with distant traffic, with life, with promise. And into that dark, silent room I whispered, "Thank you for loving me beyond my scars." Because in the end, revenge burns out. Victories fade, thrones crumble, but healing stays. And love, real love, rebuilds you from the ashes, crafting something stronger and more beautiful than you ever dared to imagine. A week after Dominic's proposal, as I packed old boxes in my apartment to move into his loft, I found something that stopped my breath. I was kneeling by my dresser, sorting through tangled jewelry, old birthday cards, and expired spa coupons when my fingers brushed against something hard and metallic tucked in the corner of a drawer. I pulled it out slowly, an unmarked flash drive. I frowned, turning it over in my hand. I didn't remember putting it there. For a moment, I wondered if it was just old work files, forgotten invoices, or abandoned mood boards for projects that never came to life. Curiosity prickled up my spine. I plugged it into my laptop, ignoring the packing tape sticking to my sweat-dampened palms. A single folder appeared on the screen, labeled only with a string of numbers and letters that meant nothing to me. My pulse quickened as I clicked it open. Inside was one file, a video. My chest tightened. My thumb hovered over the trackpad, trembling as I pressed play. The screen flickered to life, and for a moment I couldn't process what I was seeing. There was Sabrina sitting on the edge of a hotel bed wearing a pale pink silk robe. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, messy, and unbrushed, her makeup streaked down her cheeks with tears. Her eyes were red, swollen, desperate. She took a shaking breath, staring straight into the camera. Into me. "If you're watching this, it means I couldn't go through with it," she whispered, her voice breaking on every word. "I never meant for things to go this far. Nathan isn't who you think he is, Elena." I felt my breath catch in my throat, my heart slamming against my ribs like a trapped bird. "He made me do things." She continued, tears spilling faster now, dripping onto the satin sash knotted tightly around her waist. "He threatened to ruin me. To ruin you, to ruin everything if I didn't say yes. I thought if I married him it would stop, but it didn't. It just got worse." She let out a small broken sob, pressing her shaking hands to her face. "I know you hate me. And you should. God, you should. But please don't hate me forever." "I'm so sorry." The video ended abruptly, the screen fading to black, leaving only the silent reflection of my own stunned, pale face staring back at me. I sat frozen, my fingers numb on the laptop's edge, nausea curling up my throat like acid. The room felt suddenly too small, the walls closing in around me, my vision narrowing until all I saw was her tear-streaked face burned into my retinas. What had Nathan done to her? What had he threatened? What secrets had he kept hidden behind that charming smile and easy confidence? And more terrifying than anything, what was he still capable of doing? I slammed the laptop shut, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might fracture my ribs. I pressed my palms to my eyes, trying to will back the panic rising in my chest. Dominic's voice echoed faintly from the kitchen, where he unpacked dishes, humming softly under his breath, unaware of the hurricane tearing through me in that moment. I drew in a ragged breath, feeling the trembling steel coil inside my stomach tightening with each beat of my pulse. My story wasn't over. Not yet, because the man I thought I'd buried in my past, the man I thought I'd left to rot in the grave of my old life, still held secrets dark enough to burn my entire world to the ground. And if he thought he'd seen the extent of my strength before he hadn't seen anything yet. Sometimes life breaks you in ways you never imagined. Your sister steals your fiancé. The man you trusted uses your love as practice for someone else. The people you thought would protect you become silent spectators to your pain. But here's the truth. No one tells you. Revenge can feel sweet for a moment, but healing tastes better forever. Because when you rise, not to prove them wrong, but to prove yourself right. When you walk away without looking back. When you choose peace over bitterness, that's when you become untouchable. My name is Elena Carter. I lost everything I thought mattered only to find the one thing that truly did myself. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. I know parts of it were painful, but I hope they reminded you of your own strength, of how deeply you can break and still rise again. I'll see you in the next chapter where healing meets power and where love is no longer a battlefield, but a choice. Until then, stay brave, stay soft, stay unstoppable. With all my love, Elena Carter.